I'm talking about this little guy today. This is the S5 IIX from Panasonic, and it's a really awesome camera that has flaws. And when I was researching the camera, when I was trying to figure out if it was going to be the camera that I wanted to buy, I had to know these problems with it, and I wanted to share them because I didn't find a lot of videos out while I was researching it. I wanted to, from a real world perspective, talk about what are the downsides of the S5 IIX for both video production and photography.
All right, so I've been editing this YouTube video and I just wanted to add a little disclaimer. I love Lumix cameras. I own 4 Lumix cameras and I'm going to buy more as more are released, but the way that this camera was marketed, it was marketed as the video version, whereas the S5 II was labeled the photography camera. My frustration is I bought this thinking that it was going to be better for video production, and all of these cons are things I struggle with on a day-to-day basis using this camera for video production. Now, I did buy this mainly for photography, which as a photography camera, this camera is amazing, but this camera was marketed terribly because it was marketed as a video camera. It came out in a time when Lumix really needed phase detect autofocus, and the whole marketing launch was around phase detect autofocus, around video, around content creators, video production people, and that's what my frustration is with, is that it was marketed as a video centered camera when it really only has just a few extra codecs and that's it. As a video camera, I get really frustrated using this camera, so much so that I actually use my GH6s a lot more than this camera.
A little disclaimer, if I say S5 II or S5 IIX, I just mean that I'm talking about the S5 II and S5 IIX in tandem, and I will refer to the X version when I want to talk about the X version of the S5 II. It's really stupid how Lumix did this. I wish that they had just put everything that's in the X version into the S5 II as well. I think it honestly was just a marketing gimmick. And that's one of the reasons why I say it was marketed terribly. It's a hybrid mirrorless camera that is phenomenal for photography and mediocre for video production work. But if you don't know who I am, my name is Jeremy and I own and operate Levison Productions, which is a production company based in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Now, I started this YouTube channel because I felt like YouTube was losing a lot of the education and the sincerity that it had a couple of years ago. And I wanted to bring that back with educational content, with honest and open gear reviews, and tips and tricks of the trade that I've learned over the past almost 3 years of running a full-time creative business. So if that's something that you're interested in, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be notified when I post more videos. Now let's get into the problem number 1, which is the body design. So I come from a GH6 or a GH5, and I really loved the body design of those two cameras. I felt like they just had video in mind. One of the things that I loved about the GH5 was all of the function buttons that you had on the GH5. Now, it kind of went downhill with the GH6. They only had 2 function buttons on the front, and they had a bunch of these little quick menu buttons that you technically can customize. And so you lost more functionality with the GH6, but then it got even worse because you only have the 1 function button, and it's really a bummer. Now, the GH6 also has a top mic button where you can quickly access the mic settings, so you can turn your gain up and down if you need to quickly without going into the menu system. It had the front record button on the front left, and I really love that because when you're sitting to camera left, you just have to press the button. If you're on a gimbal, you just press the button and it's right there. You don't have to hit the top. It was really a well thought out camera. Because this only has 1 function button, you have to sacrifice the customizability that you want. I really like being able to quickly use that mic port on the, or mic button on the top of the GH6. But if I customize this button to the mic port, well, then I lose the functionality that I had with this button. So it just would have been nice had they taken the same design or similar design of the GH6 and put it into the S5 IIX. Now, point number 2 kind of stems from the body design, but that is the flip out screen. I like that it has a flip out screen, tilt out screen. So when you're using it as a video camera to film yourself, you have the tilt screen. The biggest problem with that is the HDMI and the USB-C port placement. Anytime you are using the USB port or the HDMI port, you can't tilt your screen. And that's a problem for me because when I'm filming B-roll, I tend to have the camera at chest height. And if I can't tilt the screen, I have to do this awkward little head tilt to try and figure out what I want, or I have to put the camera down and then mess with the screen. If I'm trying to like touch focus on what I want, then I can't touch the thing that I want focused because I can't tilt the screen out enough. And again, then I have to crank my head, and if I put it down, you're starting to see the problem. And I'm almost always using the HDMI or the USB-C when I am filming videos. I'm either powering the camera off of power delivery through USB-C, or I'm running an external monitor. That's one of the reasons why I say this camera really was not made for videographers or for production companies, because there's like little annoying things like that where you can't flip the screen out far enough. Whereas the GH6, it has the pull out screen and the tilt, swivel, pan, whatever you want to call it, screen. So it just makes it so much easier when you're using an SSD or you're using an HDMI cord. It's just so much easier. And I feel like if it adds any cost, I would have been happy to pay for that. But I feel like it just adds a level of functionality. And that's been one of the hardest things that I've had to get used to with this, using this camera. And it's one of the most annoying things that I've had to deal with the S5 IIX. The next problem for me is the 4K 60 crop. I do photography and videography for my main client, and when I'm doing video for them, I shoot in 4K 60. So if I frame up a wide shot, if I take the photo, then I have to walk backwards when I switch it to 4K 60. Or if I do video first, then I have to either zoom in or walk in to do a photo. And it's just a little annoying to just constantly have to be adjusting forward and backward and just not being able to get the framing exactly how I want it for both photo and video. I realize you can't have everything, but that is a downside if you are a hybrid photo video person like me. Having to always work around the 4K 60 crop and always having to have that in the back of your mind is really annoying, because it's just one more thing that you have to think about, one more thing that can go wrong. Again, it's just an annoyance that just makes me realize that this was not made for video production. Now, I'm gonna probably get some hate for this one, but the next thing is the autofocus. I have fought the autofocus all the time, ever since owning this, and I actually rented this camera beforehand to make sure this would be the camera that I want. I've always been fighting the autofocus, and a lot of that comes when I'm filming events or I'm doing things with multiple people in the frame, because the autofocus is finicky. If you use the touch focus, it doesn't always stay locked on, and sometimes it'll not lock. And so if you go with zone or area, it'll hunt for different people's faces. And it's like, I just want to focus on this one person, and sometimes I can't. And so it's really annoying because it's all over the place. And I'm thankful that we have the phase detect autofocus, but I'm so mad because it's so finicky. The autofocus is amazing, but it also has so many flaws. I hope that they fix this with like a firmware update. Just know that the autofocus is really finicky, and I feel like you might fight it a lot if you use this camera for like events or multiple people or things of that nature. Now, one of my biggest complaints other than the autofocus is the dual SD card slots. The GH6 has CF Express cards. Now, I've invested in CF Express cards. That's not the reason that I'm frustrated. The reason that I'm frustrated is that you have to use an SSD to record anything above 1080p ProRes on this camera. And I just wish that they would allow you to record in camera. Plus, it transfers so much faster to a computer. So it just makes a world of difference when you want to shoot ProRes. It would have been nice to have that CF Express card slot, as well as SD cards, like an SD card slot. And then this camera does not have tally light. And it may seem like a stupid little thing, but I do a lot of event photography or event videography. I do a lot of corporate interviews. I do a lot of things where I sometimes have to walk around, or I'm filming an event with tripod cameras, and then I'm using this as like, or I'm using a camera on a gimbal. and I can then walk around and make sure that all of my cameras are recording. This does not have tally light, so I have to constantly be walking back and forth just to make sure that it's still recording. And I always like to check on my cameras, and in these kinds of scenarios I can't have somebody man the camera for me, so it's just one of those things where it's like, it would be nice to have tally light like the GH6 does. Most people don't need it, but I need it, and it's just another reason I don't like this camera for video production. And then another minor gripe, not a huge deal, but just a minor gripe, is the 640 base ISO. I find that in the bright sun outside in Texas in the like daytime, 640 is just a little too high for me. Now I know Sony's like 800 ISO or something, 1250 ISO, or Fujifilm's 1250 ISO. That's just too high for me. I like the Pocket 4K or the GH5, which are 400 base ISOs, or even I actually love the GH6, which is 250 base ISO. 640 is just a little bit too high for me in the base native ISO, especially since I do a lot of outside run and gun filmmaking in Texas, which in the bright sun, it's not a big deal, but it's just an annoyance that like, I wish it was like 400 and 6400. So those are the problems that I have with the S5 IIX. Now, it is a phenomenal camera. I love the camera. I like the image that comes out of it. The photos are absolutely phenomenal. Having face detect autofocus is really awesome. So I do love this camera, and I will be coming out with a video on the positives of this camera. It was not marketed well. As I said before, when it came out, it was all face detect autofocus, and then the X version was all video centered camera. And it is a more video focused camera. It adds RAW and ProRes and all-I. I feel like they could have just put this all into one camera, called it an S5 II, and been done with it. It seemed like kind of a marketing gimmick to call it the X variant of the S5 II when it's basically the same camera, and now you get the RAW upgrade for the S5 II. Instead, you go and do this, and you make other people have to think, oh no, should I go with the S5 IIX? Should I go with the S5 II? What should I do? There are a good amount of issues with this camera that you need to be aware of if you're going to buy it, just so that you can understand like, hey, this isn't perfect. If you're looking at buying an S5 IIX, you really need to consider these downsides if you are looking mainly for video production. But if you're going for like a video centered camera, I would look at something more along the lines of an S1H or the GH6. So there are other cameras that I would recommend over this if you're saying I'm going to be a filmmaker, not a photographer. I would not recommend this camera. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope this answers some questions that you have about the S5 IIX. There will be another video coming out about the positives of this, but I just wanted to get these downsides out of the way because they've been really bugging me about this camera. With that being said, thank you for watching. I really hope you found this helpful and interesting. If you have any questions about gear, about business, about anything, please leave them in the comment section below. If you have comments on the S5 IIX, if you're an S5 IIX user, if you're somebody who is looking into this, put your comments in the comment section below. I'd love to have a conversation or a dialogue about this and help you out even more. So please put those in the comment section below. And if you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you want to subscribe to see more of my content, please do so. And I hope you have a great day and that you stay safe.